G'day everybody, welcome to the Luke 21 channel, and today I'm going to be looking at my latest timeline, my latest tribulation timeline, which covers the last 7 years, the 70th week, as described in Daniel chapter 9. And so let's just go right ahead and share the screen here. You can see this is a view of my screen, and it's showing the tribulation timeline, which I've just updated a couple of days ago. So you can see that the entire 7 years starts at 5993 AM, which is Annum Mundi, Latin. You go down to the bottom. Annum Mundi is Latin for the years since creation. So if you take the Jubilee system of being 120, the time that God says in Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, where he will contend with man, he says, I will not contend with man for more than 120 years. Genesis chapter 6, verse 3 says, the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. I take that to be 120 Jubilee cycles, because that word years can be not just solar years, it could be cycles. It's the Hebrew word shana, which could be just a complete cycle. So none of the other interpretations, like 120 years, some people say man will only live to 120 years of age, but after that time, after the flood, we saw that man indeed lived longer than 120 years. So that interpretation doesn't fit. And at the moment, man only lives for 70 or 80 years. And the other interpretation is that it was 120 years to the flood. And in fact, when you do the calculations, it's only exactly 100 years. So it must mean something else. So the way that I interpret that, along with others, is that it's 120 cycles. So if you multiply 120 by 50, you get 6,000 years. So the number of years that man will contend, that God will contend with man, is 120 times 50, which is 6,000 years. And with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like a day. It says that once in the Old Testament, once in the New. And so if you take 6,000 years since creation, and many of the early church fathers believe this as well as the Jewish Talmud as well, and other Jewish writings believes that it was 6,000 years when Christ or the Messiah will come back, and also when judgment will take place. So there we go. And that takes us right to the end, that last 7 years, which is the time of Jacob's trouble. It's when God is concerned with Israel. Now, if we take 6,000 years since creation, now that is taking us right up to basically the end of this decade. So I've roughly, I've split the last 7 years up into 1,260 days, first 3.5 years, which is the time that the two witnesses prophesy for. The second half, Daniel chapter 12, verse 11, is quite clear that it says that which is talking about resurrection of the saints, it's quite clear that the time from the abolition of the sacrificial system and the abomination of desolation set up to the end is 1,290 days. And we can see that this chart is basically split up into three colors: the yellow section here at the top, the blue section in the middle, and the green section in the bottom. So the yellow at the top is the 7 seals, because the book of Revelation is split up into sevens. It's 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls. The 7 seals encompasses nearly the entire period of the 7 years, starting with the white horse. So you've got the first 4 horses of Revelation chapter 6, the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the pale horse. White horse signifying peace, the red horse signifying war, the black horse famine, economic crisis, and the pale horse disease. And these basically start right at the very beginning, and they go right to the end, near the day of the Lord. So the 7 seals of Revelation, they're the seals that the Lamb opens. And if you look into it, it's like a double-sided scroll, one side being open and readable, and the other side was sealed, and only the Lamb was found fit to be able to open that. And that is a title deed, basically, of the contract to the earth or the world is being taken back by the Lamb of God, who is the rightful owner. So there we go. We have those 7 seals, and during that first half there as well, we see there's going to be a new type of Elijah. Some say Elijah himself, but I tend to believe that it will be a man of the end who witnesses and who prophesies in the spirit of Elijah, just as John the Baptist did the first time around. So this will be the starting point of these last 7 years. That's who we're waiting for, the 2 witnesses to start witnessing. And I'm, through my studies, I'm seeing that it's on the day, it's called the 8th day of assembly after tabernacles. It's called Shimni Atzeret. And when they finish witnessing, this midpoint here at the 5th trumpet, you can see the 5th trumpet just starts right at that point. This is when the abyss is opened by the star that falls. If we look at Revelation chapter 9, we can see exactly what that says at this halfway point. I just want to get it accurately here. The 5th angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. Now, the star that falls from the sky to the earth. My opinion is that is Satan or Lucifer. Remember in Revelation chapter 12 that he's thrown down to the earth by the Michael the archangel when the 2 are at war in heaven in Revelation chapter 12. So in my opinion, that is the one, that is the angel who opens the door to the abyss, and out of that abyss comes a whole host of demonic locusts who do his bidding. And that's when we see the start of the ministry, if you like, of the Antichrist. And they reign they torture those on the earth without the seal of God for 5 months. And that starts the beast's reign of terror. So the immediate thing, there's 3 things that the Antichrist does when he's released from the abyss, because it does say that the beast comes up out of the abyss, and in Revelation chapter 17. And the immediate thing that he does is kill the 2 witnesses. They lay dead in Jerusalem for 3.5 days. And then he sets up the abomination of desolation on the wings of the temple, and he stops the sacrificial system. That was set up by, I believe, by Elijah and the 2 witnesses at the start. So from start to finish, we have 7 years exactly. So 1260 days, the first 3.5, 1290, the second half, and that brings in the 6,000 years, the end of the 6,000 years. So now, whereas the 7 seals encompass the whole 7-year period just about, the Feast of Trumpets, this blue section, they encompass, we don't know when, it doesn't really say when it starts. It just says that the first 4 trumpet judgments are what we call the judgment, the judgment of the thirds. So hail and fire burns, 1/3 of the vegetation, 1/3 of the sea creatures die, 1/3 of the fresh water of all fresh water becomes bitter. That's the 3rd trumpet. And the 4th trumpet is 1/3 of all the light is diminished. And if you take this, it's causative. So this could be known ahead of time, but it looks like it's all to do with the asteroid named Wormwood. And so this is a judgment possibly brought about upon the Earth's environment to bring about repentance. And the 4th judgment of the thirds may possibly cause reduction by 1/3 in length of the day. I'm not sure about that, but there is going to be at least 1/3 of the Earth is going to be diminished in the light. Now, if we look at this, it seems like it's all to do with a meteor and an asteroid that breaks up on the Earth and causes this great damage. So then the last 3 trumpet judgments starts at the halfway point, are called woe, 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 or disaster, 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 and they encompass the second half of the tribulation period. Disaster 2, or the 6th trumpet judgment, is the great army of 200 million that kills 1/3 of mankind. And then the seventh trumpet that occurs right at the Feast of Trumpets. And at the seventh trumpet, the last trumpet, there's 100 trumpets that occur. 100 trumpets that occur on the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. And the last trumpet is known as Takai Gedolah, and that is blown at the last trumpet of that feast. And that's when the rapture of the church occurs. The woman goes up and Jesus Christ comes down to meet his church. And all those all over the earth. It says in Revelation, Matthew chapter 24, he sends out angels to the four corners of the earth. And the last bowls, the green section, that fits into the last 10 days. So the 7 bowl trumpets, it gets more intense as we go towards the end. There's more things that are happening. Now, it looks like that I've got these 7 bowls of wrath. They start at the halfway point and go to the end, but that's only because I didn't have room. But if you see this arrow, it's condensed down into this last 7 days. And they're the 7 bowls of wrath there that are from God, whereas the trumpet judgments are from angels, and the seals, they're looking at 3 different things, 3 different types of judgments. So the one of the main things of the timeline is to see that when the abyss is opened, I believe that this is a new Adolf Hitler, or it's the beast at least who comes up out of the abyss. He's been locked up, and he comes up out of the middle section there. One of the major points of this chart is if you can calculate the 6,000 years right to the end. You come to the 1st of October 2036, which is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. That's the day of the Lord. That's the day that the Lord returns to the earth and defeats all the enemies, satanic enemies, the Antichrist enemies, and false prophet at the Battle of Armageddon. If you calculate back 1,290 days, you come to the point of Purim, the eve of Purim on the 13th of March 2033. And interestingly, that commemorates, Purim is one day, but it commemorates the saving of the Jewish people from Haman in the Old Testament, in the book of Esther. And that is the point where I believe that the abyss is open and immediately the 2 witnesses are attacked and killed. But it's also, at the same time, a signal for those in Judea to flee. If we read Matthew 24, verse 15, that is actually the sign that we are to be waiting for, if we believe in this, for the church and the woman of Revelation chapter 20, Revelation chapter 12. But Matthew 24, verse 15 says that this is the key. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. That's the mountains in Jordan, over the other side of the Rift Valley. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. So that's going to introduce the timing, that last 3.5 years, where it's going to be an intense period like the world has never seen before, of distress and persecution and tribulation. In fact, it says in the very next verse, in verse 22, says, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. And those days indeed have been shortened to only 3.5 years. Satan is going to get his opportunity to reign, so to speak, and gain worshippers. And that's what he's going to do in that last 3.5 year period. But just as Purim commemorates the Jewish people being saved from Haman, that is also going to be the key for that last 1,290 days. So the woman is protected in the wilderness for 1,290 days until Jesus comes back, till the rapture, and they're going to be able to be protected during that time. And that's the signal. Now, if you take 1,260 days back from the 13th of March 2033, on the eve of Purim, you exactly come to Shimni Atzeret, the 8th day of assembly after tabernacles in 2029. And so that's a perfect day when the Jews would assemble after all of the festivities of the Day of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, and then the 10 days of awe, and then the Day of Atonement, and then the Feast of Tabernacles, the last three feasts of the year, the fall feasts, or the autumn feasts, if you like, in the Northern Hemisphere. Then the very next day, that's when I believe we're going to see the two witnesses to start their ministry for 1260 days. My prediction is, and I'm not saying thus saith the Lord, but this is, if everything's correct, that would occur on the 1st of October 2029, and exactly 7 years later, the 1st of October 2036, we're going to see Christ return in glory. And this is my timeline, and I haven't explained the 1335 days. You can read that for yourself, and there's lots of interesting information on my website, different blogs explaining why I believe it's Hitler, and come back again, and that's all in Revelation chapter 17. He's the only one who meets all the clues, who matches up all the clues. And then we've got the 2,300 morning and evenings prophecy. And when we add the 1,150 days, which is half of 2,300, because there's two sacrifices, one in the morning, one in the evening, so you have to divide by two. You add that to the 150 days of terror, the reign of terror from the beast and his demonic locus. You add those two, you get to 1,300. So from the halfway point, the 1,300 days equals exactly the time to when Christ returns in glory on the earth. So there's a lot of things that fit in here, and I would encourage you to take a real careful look at this. And it's exciting. It's also terrifying at the same time, but there's a lot of information here. And if you've got any questions, don't hesitate in asking me. I'll be happy to let you know for my reasoning for a lot of these judgments that come up at their particular time, and the number of the days, etc. So I hope that's been a blessing to you today. And remember that we need to be ready, pray, and watch for all the signs that are about to happen, and pray that you may be able to escape all that's about to happen. God bless.